Aries the ram. Just like Jesus is represented as a what? Lamb. So is he a lamb? Is it lamb worshippers? No, he's personified as a lamb, sometimes even as a what? Lion. Like the Lion of Judah. 1,000 years is long gone. Well, come on in. Look at the plume feathers above them. Those plume feathers represent Ma'at. I have not robbed, I have not stolen, I have not prolonged the offerings, I have not defiled myself. Originally 147 broken down into 42 laws of Ma'at that you're going to see when we get into the Valley of Kings. But as you look at those symbols, what comes to mind when you look at that? How about the tabernacles? That you get a sketch of, right? So the question is, did that idea come from here?
Yes, sir.
Right. The obvious speaks for itself. We'll have that in upcoming.
Two lines of the columns higher. The other columns are smaller. You can see the windows for the light to go through in the middle. The same idea for basilica. The idea taken from here to Europe. Now you know all the other nations completely learned from African civilization. African civilization was suckling knowledge to Europe. I mean this expression, suckling, nursing knowledge to Europe, especially in the Greek period and in the Roman period later on, in the Greek-Roman period. Africa was
The New Kingdom could not read the Old Kingdom. But we know a lot of information because of repetition over and over and over again, as by the way has just pointed out. And so some of the Medu Neter we will be familiar with, like for instance, you see the Sarah. We know the Sarah is the Son of God. You see that symbol like that? Septepen Ra. Septepen Ra. That means he's chosen by Ra. Okay? Ursa, see the power of Ursa? Ma'at Ra, Septepen Ra. Now there's another part of his relief, his name also, but that's the first part of his name. Ursa, Ma'at Ra, Septepen Ra. Nebtui, you always see the bull, Nebtui. He's the Lord of the two lands. That is Ta-Nehisi and Tamari. That makes him the unifier, the scimitar that we were talking about last night. The wreck bird, see the wreck bird? Those of you on this side, that's the wreck bird. Look at the doer of the wreck bird. He's giving the admiration to the Shanu's. These Shanu's, again, and very small, Ursa Ma'at Ra, Septepen Ra, Ramesu Mari Amen. That means he's born of Ra. And he's loved by Amen. That's what we see right here. Other symbols that we see here, again, when I talked about, we'll come down here a little bit. You're always going to see these symbols. Let me get this one up here. Nesubet. Nesubet. Again, that's another symbol for Upper and Lower Egypt. Now, why would they use the sedge and the bee? Because Kemet wanted to have saw the intelligent life and animal represented as the bee for Upper Kemet, and the sedge for Lower Kemet. That means the innate intelligence of nature, the innate intelligence of animal life. That's how our ancestors saw it. So this is what you're going to see in a repetition and association with the Nesu's name. You'll always see the bee, and the sedge for intelligent life in animals and also innate intelligent life in plant life. Now, again, as we said, when we look even from an architectural perspective, we can see how Kemet laid the foundation of even how the churches are even built. For instance, when we look up there and see the clerestory, see the clerestory of the light coming through the windows there? Now, when we are in European images for European idolatry, but that idea of the clerestory, of the light coming down into the temple, especially coming down into the papyrus swamps here, goes all the way back to our ancestors, representing the primeval beginning. That primeval beginning is what? Of creation. Creation, procreation, and renewal. So this is a science called architectonics. Architectonics is that they're using natural nature from their empirical observation of Mut Netchet and showing the papyrus swamps and Ra, the sun, coming down into the papyrus swamps that you see here. So as we've been saying, the temple is a microcosm of the universe, but at the same time bringing together the whole beginning of the light coming down, giving life to the papyrus, where they actually put it in stone, called architectonics. So that's very important to even understand. When you go into a church again and you see the light and the clear story of the church, then you can see the prototype of where that began right here. Now, just to give us an idea of just how large these columns are, the larger ones are down the nave that are 79 feet high. And we want to see just how many of us it would take to make a circumference of, around one of these masts. It's supposed to be the sacred place of the deity's house or God's house on earth. Here is that is starting from right here in Kemet, right here at the fallopian tube, right here in the northeast corner, right here in the original Taneter land. This is the original Taneter land before there was any other places called Holy Lands. This is the original, where it came from. So here we have the Ankh Manu, the holies of the holies, and we don't go inside. Now you can always tell we're going up a ramp. So I'm, by the way, going to take you for a second while I go around the back.
Look here, please. From this window, you saw in the lecture of Professor Ashrakwezi that the sun early in the morning rises from this part in 25th of December each year. Every year, the sun rises from this window to bless the temple and go the داخل ولا ادخل؟ لا اتفضل انت حضرتك اتفضل استاذنا يعني حبيبنا. The sun appears from this part to bless the temple. Very important. And that's called Bir Hajj, the house of light. Lighthouse. Lighthouse.
Yes.
That's the culture. That's the story and legacy. That is us. That's a civilization. I'd like my job is to give all this information and make it easy to you to remember and make it lifelike from reality. That's why the sanctuary called Bir Hajj. Hajj is white, like.
And this is Hatshepsut, who has been chiseled out, some say by her stepson, Menkaperatu Maids, even though we don't really have any validation of that. We do know that the heretic, as they refer to as the heretic king or Nesu. In research, you find the Rhine mathematical papyrus. This is the European who put his name on an ancient papyrus. That papyrus, it may even go back to Imhotep. So it had nothing to do with the Orion mathematical papyrus. So when people speak of these things, they speak of it in European names. But in our educational system, we were told that Archimedes was the Greek who was the mathematician. Is that right? But you can't find pyramid building in Greece. Okay? So when they speak of Archimedes, they're about deifying themselves without the evidence. When you see the mathematical structures that we see, like the building of those MERS, when we were in Lower Kemet, that gives validity to who were the true mathematicians, because even to this very day, they don't know how those MERS that the Greeks called pyramids were even built. So we come back here to research the truth, the facts, so they can speak to us, not from the barbarians' names, not from the usurpers' names, but from the indigenous Kemetic Africans of the Nile Valley. So when we think of the mathematical table and we take math in school and so forth, all of this is in European names. Euclid and so forth, Pythagorean theorem. Where did he get his theorem at? His theorem came from right here. Pythagoras spent 22 years here studying. He never finished 40 years of his total initiation into the craft of the Shishada mystery system. Mystery came from the Greeks called mysterion, because all this knowledge was a mystery to them. It was a mystery to them of how the MERS were built. It was a mystery to them when they saw the medical instruments that you're going to see in a few days at Kamumbo, that medical science even used to this very day for surgery. So it all became mystery, all right? Because they didn't know the science of it. So on this wall right here, there is no mystery. It's a mathematical table. There were no Europeans or no Rhines at this particular time. And by the way, we'll give us some information on this mathematical table right here.
May I have your attention, please? The ancient Egyptians used the temple not only for worship. They used the temple also for teaching the royal family, the princes of Egyptians and those who brought from Asia after the wars, and teach them elementary education. Elementary education. Like here, for example, the mathematics, the numbers. Here, for example, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. That's 11. 7. That's 13. Here.
And when you see a lot of the names that close to the top, the reason why those names are up there is because the sand was up that high. Like for instance, Champollion, his name is right there. That's because the sand had covered up to that area for him. He did not get a ladder to climb up there. The sand was up there that high, okay? But these temples were under the sand for 1,000 years. Kemet sacred knowledge, and some of that knowledge that's been revealed by Badaway and I, that knowledge was unknown for 1,000 years, and even still unknown, because when so many people come through here, spiritual ideas that we're talking about, like Sarah, son of God, and things like that, that's not told to many of these Europeans. Why? Because it would conflict with their religious interests, so they don't want to have a conflict with the people who are most of the tourists who come here are Europeans and Chinese and so forth. So nobody speaks of these things like we're speaking of here. But it was Champollion, as we said before, when they stole the Rosetta Stone in an area in the Delta called Rosetta, that he started to study this stone. And this is how we got some of the interpretation of the Medu Neter. We don't know all of the interpretation of the Medu Neter, because our ancestors, the Karihe priests, wrote in a cryptographic form for only the priests to know. There was an esoteric as well as an exoteric interpretation. Esoterically, that was only written for the priest to understand. So there's a lot of the Medu Neter, excuse me, from the books in stone that we still do not know. They're told about deep spiritual meaning. But this area right here, like there are many temples down inside of the temple of Amun, okay? About 20 of them. And right here we can see that this one is Men Keparatu Nitmaze, that's his name right there in that Chinook, okay? Tahuti maize. So when you hear me say Tahuti, who are you going to see in his name? The ibis bird, Tahuti maize, right there. Okay? So he was a warrior. He had 19 battles. He had so many battles that even his temple right here is in a form of a tent. Okay? Now, one of the things that we want to see here is the image when the Byzantine Romans came in here.
Just a second.
Okay, go ahead, by the way. By the way, just mentioned that when the church was established, they actually used Ben Keparat temple as a church. So again, if the temple was supposed to be so pagan and heathen, one has to ask, why use it as a church? Now, one of the times, this is the first time we're starting to see the Serapis Jesus. This Serapis was started during the time when the Greeks, after Alexander's death, his generals took over like Silver One. It was during the Ptolemaic period that they started to take over and was here for 300 years. And they started to study the salvation and resurrection. And who is the salvation and resurrection personified as? A Tsar. So studying this, when they came to the throne, they took and made and simulated a Tsar into their Greek god named Serapis. This Serapis, later on when the Byzantine Roman Christians come, this Serapis now becomes, as you look up here, the Jesus, with the sun behind his head. When I said the concept called Sa-Ra, that's why the sun is behind his head, because they were copying this concept. So all those images that you see in America on the churches of the European Jesus, that is Serapis, that was created at the Conference of Nicene in 325 AD, and is at these ecumenical conferences as the formulation of the Western version of Christianity. It is here at the Conference of Ephesus in 431 AD that Aset was de-Africanized. Here she was de-Africanized because Aset was called Murray. She was a goddess also associated with love, just like Heteru. So they took from the concept Murray that you see on many of the columns like we saw over there, and I showed you Murray. What does Murray look like in the Medunetter? Tell me.
Side A.
An A with two feathers, Murray. And they associated that with Mary. And this is where they de-Africanized the goddess of Set at the Conference of Ephesus. When we study these conferences, we can clearly see how they took and de-Africanized African Kemetic spirituality. It was the Conference of Chalcedon. That this is where they took the term Sa-Ra and associated with the Serapis Jesus as the Son of God. And that's the reason why when it comes to these ecumenical conferences and other historical things associated with Christianity, they don't speak of these things from the pulpit. Because if you were to speak of these things, then you would start to do research and see its origin of where it came from. But unfortunately, this is a time that we got caught into bringing into the European white idolatry. Unfortunately, this is a time when that image became the deity and the spiritual subconscious of our minds, as I say, how the enemy became the deity. They produced that image on the world and brainwashed through the dogma of the religion that that was real. And to this day, people think that that whole concept of the Jesus thing is real. Now, were there men fighting the Romans? Yes, they were. And they deified them. Okay, that means that their Ka, their spirit, they put it on the line. They knew that they were going to die. Okay? So translating that Ka to the day would be the what? The Ka, it becomes the what? The Ka becomes the Christ. Okay? Because we're talking about spirit. The Romans didn't understand spiritual things. They took the physical body literally. So as I said, why would they take the Serapis Jesus and the pictorial art and wrap him up as a mummy? If you're going to go to heaven, just get on up and go. Why you got to wrap him up like a mummy? Because they were copying Kemetic concepts. And the process of Kemet was wrapping the mummy up for a metamorphosis to take place inside of the body for the spiritual body to rise up. That spiritual body was called the Sahu body. We're going to show you on the reliefs of the Sahu when we get further during our cruise, our other temples coming up. Here we see the Sahu is dancing. Now, if you look at that literally as a person, then you got it wrong. That's what the Romans did. They took it literally. That is a spiritual Ka. He's in the afterlife. He's dancing because he's free of the swathing. Okay, he's free of that. So he's dancing in the spiritual life. Now, let me bring something to your memory. How many of you are familiar with the dancing Christ? All the picture of Leonardo da Vinci and all of them who got the picture, he's always like this. Okay, for salvation. He's going up. He's always got one leg down and one leg up. Okay? They copied that from the Sahu. So when you understand how our ancestors used Maknechik, like a caterpillar crawling on the ground, or like that little scarabus, it goes through what? Cocoons. Metamorphic, chrysalis. So here's a chrysalis, and what takes place? A butterfly. So by our ancestors, you look at Maknechik, they took the mummified, the cot they call the mummy today. Christianity came and adopted that same idea for the pictorial images and the iconography of the pictures of the European Jesus wrapped up as the mummy. Okay, all coming from here. So only until we start to connect the spiritual historical dots can we see that how these things were literally taken and corrupted till we can't see the spirituality anymore. That is a morbid concept to think that the physical body is going to get up out the grave one day and go up to heaven. That is really morbid to even think that. Spirituality, there's another part that our ancestors called the Ka, spirit, Ba, the soul. So they understood that, and that's what we're going to get into this evening in our lecture. And I'm going to deal, because our next day, tomorrow, is going to be the Valley of Kings. And when we go there, we're going into a space and place where they're actually writing spiritual ideas. And some of these things are beyond our comprehension to understand, but as long as we can understand at the essence of the spiritual things that they were trying to convey, then we can break through the matrix that we're in, or trapped in, the dogma of what the Byzantine Romans that led up into the various denominations that brought us up into here today. So tomorrow we go into the Valley of Kings. The lecture is going to help you see some things, not everything, because I'd be an egotistical maniac to think I can show you everything or even know everything, okay? But at least you'll be able to grasp some things as we've been pointing out in the Medu Neter. But that image, this is where it's starting at right here, that now becomes and permeates through the Western world. By the way, might want to say a couple of things.
From here, ladies and gentlemen, if you stand here exactly.
Ankh Neferneter. That means the life of, here, of the good God. Of the good God. Now, what is he right here? Kemetnu? What is he right here? What position is he in?
Asarian.
No, he's an Asarian right here. What position is he in?
Oh,
No,
he's
he
alive.
ain't ready to go to
It means he's
heaven.
alive. I forgot
He's
the
in
title.
the Nisiam Su. He's trampling down evil for his heart to go forward. Left, right, left, right. Here he's in the spiritual realm. See, because he's in the Asarian. The Asarian is always like this. Left leg forward, he's in this life. He has to trample down evil because it's the Nisu's job to maintain Ma'at in the land, to stop Isfet forces from coming in. Okay? And on that one, 319 nations failed to mend Keparat Yehudi Maze. Now, even though that's a Shanu, see their arms tied up? Look. But what's the difference in this Shanu and the Shanu that you bought? There's no line in it. See? So these are all captives of war. All over here. Main Keparat Yehudi Maze. Making sure that no invasions would come into Kemet again. The warrior Nisu as he was. These are the books in stone, brothers and sisters. Long before paper, where it gets its name from papyrus, here we see the books in stone. Everything that you see here, there was no Western world yet. There was no America yet. There was no England yet. There was no France yet. There was no Germany yet. All the places that we were taught to deify did not exist yet. Go to Europe, but only go there to see what they stole from Kemet. Look at the Eiffel Tower. And see the Eiffel Tower was plagiarized from that Kemetnu that you see right there. So right across the street in the Concord Square is the Kemetnu. But where did they get the design of the Eiffel Tower? From here. So again, you come back for a journey to know.
Two lines of the columns higher. The other columns are smaller. You can see the windows for the light to go through in the middle. The same idea for basilica. The idea taken from here to Europe. Now you know all the other nations completely learned from African civilization. African civilization was suckling knowledge to Europe. I mean this expression, suckling, nursing knowledge to Europe, especially in the Greek period and in the Roman period later on. In the Greek